All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like. I Mix What I Like.org at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to play host. And I want to welcome two very special guests to talk about a new book that they've written called Clandestine, The Times and Secret Life of Mariah Otey Reddick by Bill Damani and Ife Keene. Who I welcome to the show right now. Welcome to the both of you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Jared. We appreciate you. Thank you.
There's a lot I want us to get into that I would love for us to talk about at some point, including the connections to D.C. and Howard University, that both of you have, and Miley's general proximity and hanging out around there, knowing people there. Our connections to Africana Studies and Dr. James Turner, who put us in touch a long time ago. We have to give him a big shout out.
Yes.
Definitely.
Our connections to you sort of being expats in Panama and my marrying into a Panamanian family.
Right.
There's a lot going on.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
But let's at least start for today, and we'll build more on these other things in the future with this book. I've had a chance to read at least some of it, get started, and there's a lot I want to ask you about. But first, just introduce us to this book, why you've written it, and what you hope to be doing with the story. Why you think this kind of story is important.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, in the subtitle is Mariah Otey Reddick, my great-grandmother. She was born in Mississippi into slavery, was enslaved there, Louisiana, Tennessee, Alabama, back to Tennessee, and finally emancipated in Tennessee. And as you mentioned, Panama, when I retired from Howard, we relocated here to Panama. We're in the beautiful highlands of Panama. And I decided I'd do something I'd always wanted to do, which was to research my family, particularly my dad, because my dad, born in Jamaica, lived in Panama for a while before he went to the States. And I have dozens and dozens and dozens of second, third, fourth cousins, but I can't find a single one of them. So I began looking. Panamanians here helped me out. They found some other Keenes here from Jamaica. We call ourselves cousins, but we can't show any connection. Good people though, right? Really great people. I love to be related to them. And so I looked and finally, I said, well, let me do some research on my mom's side. I knew a little something, had some information, but not really much. I had no idea how much I didn't know. And so I went off and on for, many years. And one night, I just kind of threw my hands up, Jared, just in kind of frustration because I couldn't seem to get past the wall. And I said, let me Google Mariah. Jared, I Googled Mariah's name, and the whole Library of Congress opened up. It was just amazing. That night, it was November 6th, 2013. It was 3 days before what would have been my mom's 100th birthday. And man, it was just incredible. That night, I found a lot of things out. First of all, I saw for the first time a picture of my great-grandfather, Bowen. I'd never seen the brother before. Very distinguished man with a handlebar mustache, the whole deal. So, but I also, in the caption to one of the pictures under Mariah's name was that she'd been given as a wedding gift when she was about 10 years old. And Jared, like you, we're not novices to history. We know the brutality, the cruelty of slavery, chattel slavery in the West. But when it strikes that close to you, this is my mom's grandmother, who she knew as a child. And when it strikes that close to you, it just has a different kind of impact. So that night, I was so excited. I mean, just emotional and everything. I wrote all our kids, family, and told them these things I had discovered, and it was just truly a revelation. So found out that she had been a main character in a best-selling novel. The novel is called The Widow of the South, and it was basically about her owner. I always put owner, quote, who became famous. And so as a result, Mariah's name was all through a lot of different things. So there was a lot of information about her. And we contacted the author of the book. We went to Franklin, Tennessee. I'd never been to my mom's hometown. I'm really ashamed of that now. I'd never been there to check this out, Jared. We went to Toussaint Louverture Cemetery in Franklin, Tennessee. I mean, come on now. And stood at the gravesite. And there were, the gravestones, the headstones for Mariah, for Bolin, my grandparents, John Watt, and his wife, Della Reddick. And it was just an awe-inspiring thing. And both of us.
And very, very emotional.
Yeah, both of us were very, very affected by it. So there we are in Franklin. We go out to the Carnton plantation. And we go stand in one of the only actually remaining quarters, as they called it. We call it Little Africa. You could just feel the presence, the emotions of people who lived in bondage, who did not enjoy any of the kind of freedoms and conveniences that we had. But you could also feel their spirit of resistance and resilience. And this is what really picked us up. So there's a lot more to that story, Jared. I'll just say that we were inspired to write the story because even though it's centered on Mariah and her family, really and truly, this is all of our family's story. Mm-hmm. And so we took the route of a historical novel so that we could bring into play all of the history that was going on around them, as well as the history that they made. And this is, I think, the key point.
Well, I did want to ask that, and maybe Ife, I'll start with you, if you don't mind, that on the question of why the choice of a historical novel, or what maybe the role of that kind of writing plays in telling this kind of history. And then maybe even a word or two. I was thinking as I was trying to read enough to be at least somewhat caught up for our interview today, I kept thinking of, the contemporary Me Too moment. And what it means that this story is centering not only a woman, but specifically an African descended woman. And then I did also want to ask you both, and I'll maybe, just about the importance of the Pan-African nature of the story. So,
yes.
But if you want to start with any of those, the importance of the historical novel to this tale, to the centering of an African woman particularly in this moment, and the Pan-African nature, if you please.
Yeah, well, what we really, really wanted to do was to write a story that uplifts African culture and speaks to as Damani said, the resistance, the resilience of our people, the splendor, the glory, the beauty, and tell a truthful story about our history. Our history has been so many lies have been told, and it's time for the truth to be revealed. And telling this story, also wanted to tell a story about a beautiful, feisty, intelligent, and really kind of strategically deceptive person, but a person who had a reason for being that way. And Mariah's story is just, well, it's all inspiring. And for women, especially today, and our young women in particular, they need to hear these stories.
Absolutely.
They need to hear these stories.
Absolutely.
And another thing we're trying to do in this book is link generations.
Yes.
We want to bring the older and the younger people together.
Right, right.
So that's, I'm so inspired by this. I'm a twice published author.
Right.
But I was a technical writer well, let me say it this way. My background is in the information systems arena. And one of the things I did was an abundance of technical writing. And I enjoyed, of course, my career, but that type of writing was not exciting at all. It was very tedious, detailed, and frankly, very boring writing. So once I retired, I decided that I wanted to do a little more writing that was more exciting.
Right.
So I have written 2 novels. So, and I am so happy to be a part of writing, doing some writing that I've never done before. And it is so different from what I've done. And I'm happy that my husband asked me to join him on this journey. And it's a journey that is really one of the most exciting journeys I've taken because of the content.
And of course, as he said, as you both point out, it's a story that is beyond importance to just your family, but is something that speaks to sort of a collective experience, which is why I did want, is we sort of have to close, unfortunately for now, is kind of go back, if I could, to that point about the Pan-African nature of both Mariah's story and your own. I mean, I have to say, I'm fascinated by it. And in particular, in this moment where I think there's a lot of pushback on the traditions, particularly the radical traditions of Pan-African politics, that, your story alone has Jamaica and Panama, the United States, the entire, and the differences in North to South and enslavement to so-called emancipation. I mean, that's in itself a Pan-African. I don't know. So is there something that you all could say about that and how that relates to the work you've done here? And then please make sure we're clear about where people can go to get the book.
Okay. All right. Well, let me just asterisk something that you alluded to and that Ife talked about too, and that is that history has been used as a weapon against us. Mm-hmm. And so when you ask why did we choose historical fiction as a vehicle, because we need to tell the other side of the story. And so our story is embedded in the quarters, in the little Africas. So on the Pan-African angle, it is, the fictionalized part is that we made Mariah a descendant of an Igbo woman, an Igbo root woman, who was captured and taken to the Caribbean, to Barbados, and then brought to the U.S. And Mariah maintained the working of the roots. And so that's in the story. One of the other heroes of the book is a brother historical figure by the name of Garcon, who was from Pensacola, Florida, and was became the general at African Fort in Apalachicola, which is a very little known history of the armed aspect of resistance among African people in the West, and in that case, in coalition with Native Americans. And so,
sorry for the interruption, but I just want to thank you for that because that's one of my favorite aspects of the history. Yes. I appreciate that. Just selfishly, sorry for the interruption. Please continue.
No problem. So, Garçon, how did he come to be Garçon? A French name. And so we created a background for him, backstory that goes into Haiti. And so the Pan-African flavors throughout the book. One of the elders in the book is a brother named Kwame from Ghana, who passes on some of the stories and the culture. And of course, there are people who doubt other Africans there in the quarters who doubt the veracity of what he's saying. And so he is able to back up his story. And so all this is happening with, with the background of the abolition movement at a certain point in the story. And the story basically goes up until 1922. And so we even have a brother by the name of Solomon Platje, who was a leader of the early anti-apartheid and independence movement in South Africa, who comes to visit the U.S. on a trip where the NAACP and the UNIA hosted him to speak around the country. And of course, in our book, in Clandestine, he comes to Nashville, which is only 20 miles north of Franklin. And Mariah gets to meet him and hear him speak, and she kind of likes what Garvey's saying, So and by the way, there's a man by the name of Little, who comes from Omaha, who introduces Platje at that meeting. So, there's a lot in there.
Yes.
And of course the Klan and Bedford Forrest and his guys and Fort Pillow, the 44th U.S. Colored Troops. And so there's a lot there.
There's also a love story.
And it's a love story. Right.
So in other words, what you're saying is there's something in it for everybody.
Everybody.
Yes.
The only thing
some revolution, some African culture, some history.
Right, exactly.
Who doesn't want
that? Spirituality. The only thing we would say, it's not a children's book. There's adult themes involved. There's violence. There's death. There's terror, but there's also joy. There's hope. There's devotion to family and so on. So we are at this point inviting your listeners to honor their ancestor. We call it Honor Thy Ancestor. And we would love to receive names of ancestors whose names we can use for fictional characters in the book. We can't tell that person's ancestor story, but we can honor them by, like we have Ife's mom's Johnny May. So one of our characters is Johnny May, and a main character actually. And so we want to honor other people's ancestors in the book and encourage them to research and tell their ancestor story as well.
Which is all of our stories.
It's all of our story. All of our stories. So the book is not, we're still in the editing phase. We sent you an advanced reader copy. Apologize for the little editor notes. It's still in there. But we anticipate publishing in the very near future. And our website where you can get more information is Clandestine. Is it okay if I do a little screen share?
Sure.
So clandestine-life.com, and that will get to the site, and then there's a page there where people can honor thy ancestor. So, Jared, I know our time is limited, but can I just share one last thing? Because
Sure.
I hope this will inspire other people in this regard. I'm doing this research for Mariah, and all of a sudden, all these different things pop up. This right here, brother, is her deposition about the Franklin Riot of July 6th, 1867, where she saw the events of an armed confrontation between the Union League, which was also known as the Loyal League and the Colored League and the Union League and the Lincoln League and all the rest, and against the conservatives in France. And this is her deposition, man. Now, we've seen it, the original where she signed with her ex because she learned to read, but she never learned to really write well. But can you imagine, man, we're reading my great-grandmother's own words of an event that happened, a signal event. The Union military sent investigators, and this was, they interviewed her. So this is the kind of thing that has just been just so amazing to us in this whole entire process. And we found other documents about her. I mean, it's just amazing.
No, it sounds like it. I've already enjoyed my start of the book. I appreciate it. Can't wait to get the finished copy. I'm going to put in a bid to see if I get one or two, ancestors in there myself. Good. We encourage folks to do the same. I think it's a great way of promoting and making this a collective piece of work anyway. So Ife and Damani Keene, thank you very much for joining me on this edition of I Mix What I Like, and we look forward to building in the future. And I predict a version of Academics in Cars with you in the summer of 2019 in Panama. So,
nice!
I'm looking forward to that. So, more of this coming. So, but thank you very much for joining me, and thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Absolutely. We appreciate the time.
And today, by the way, is a big Panamanian patriotic holiday.
That's right. They just celebrated liberation and all of that. And I'm always lovingly joking with my wife because I'm always making fun of these colonial boundaries.
That's right.
Y'all were Colombians yesterday, and then somebody drew a line and called yourself Panamanians, and we do the same thing everywhere. We get excited by these colonial boundaries, but that's why I love that Pan-African story. Right,
exactly.
Thank you both again.
All right. Take care, man. Good to see you, bro.
Likewise. Take care.
All right, bye.
I mix what I like.